Hello, today is your first video that you will be watching at home, so you made it. This is 2-1, so go ahead and label the top of a new piece of paper this, and we will be working with mental math. So make sure if I'm going too fast for you, you pause the video so you can take proper notes. How I like to start each video is with definitions and vocabulary words that you will need to know. So I do want you to put these into your spiral. So the first one is commutative property, and that is saying that the order of the factors, which are the numbers in the multiplication problem, can be changed and the product will remain the same. So 3 times 5 is 15, and even if you switch them, 5 times 3 is 15 as well. So commutative property, you are just changing the factors. Now, associative property is the second one you need to know. And this means that the factors can be regrouped and the product remains the same. Sorry, that was my phone in my classroom ringing. Okay, so the associative property, basically, the parentheses in each of the problems are moved around two different numbers. So as you can see right here, the parentheses are around 4 and 10, and over here it's around 2 and 4. So, but it states that the product will remain the same. So that means they equal the same thing. So as I showed you down here, 4 times 10 is 40, and because you always have to do what's in the parentheses first, times 2 is 80. Okay, so 80 is our grand total. Over here, 2 times 4 is the 8, and then 8 times 10 is 80. So they still equal the same. They just switched where the parentheses are and the numbers inside of the parentheses. And the last one that you will need to know for today, the last vocabulary word, is compatible numbers. And these are numbers that are easy to compute mentally. So I do want you to write this part, but down here is what would be considered non-compatible numbers. So if I bought something for $20.75 and then I bought something else for $10.59, that's kind of hard to compute in your head. So we would most likely round it, and we would round this up to 21, we would round 1059 up to 11, and then add them to get 32. So we will be talking about that today, but with decimals. And sorry, I lied, there is one more vocabulary word, and it is compensation, and that means, so compensation means to adjust one or both numbers to make the computation easier, then compensate to get the final answer. So you will be adjusting two numbers and adjusting the final answer. That is all that means. I will show you how that is done next. Okay, so this is my first example. I definitely want you to write this down in your spiral because you are going to need to have it to look back in order to do your problems tomorrow in case you forget overnight while you're sleeping. So here's my example, 2.1 plus 0.9 plus 1.2, and it's kind of hard to do this in my head, so we are going to use compatible numbers and compensation to solve this problem more easily. On your work, it is going to ask you to solve this mentally, but you need to use compensation to do that. So all compensation is, so whatever I write in yellow, I also want you to write. Compensation is, if I take this 0.1 and move it over here, what does that make my 0.09? It makes it into a whole number of 1. And then, since I took it away, this just leaves this as 2. So now I have two compatible numbers, two numbers that are easy to add together. And then I still have the 1.2 at the end. See how much easier this makes it to add at the end. So if I add 2 plus 1, I get 3. And then I have to bring that down, bring this down. So now I have 3 plus 1.2. Well, we know 3 plus 1 is 4, and then we add the 0.2 onto the back. So that is what we will be working on today. Compensation was just kind of moving some numbers around and borrowing. All right, my next example is 1.9 plus 3.4. We are going to do this one together, and then I am going to have you do a couple on your own first quiz questions. So, not all of the time will it be a problem such as 9.1 plus 2.1, or 1.9 plus 2.1, and I take this, move it over, make it a whole number. You're not always going to have it easy like that. So when we compensate here, we want to make one of these numbers into a whole number. And the easiest way to do that is borrow or compensate from this 4. And if I just take a 0.1 away from him, and I take this over here, so if I have 1.9 plus the 0.1, I get a whole number 2. Because 9 plus 1, 10. That's what I get, 2. But I have to remember, if I take away from the 3.4, it's almost like 3.4 minus 0.1, and that would give me 4 minus 1 is 3. Drop my decimal down, drop this 3 down, and so I would have 2 plus 3.3. All right, and so then we would just add straight across. So take your whole numbers first. So 2 plus 3 is 5, and then add your 0.3 onto the back, and you get 5.3. Easy enough. So if you are a person who likes steps, you can write these if you like steps, but if you don't need to write these. So your first step would be to look at both of the decimals that you're either adding or subtracting, see which one is easier to change to a whole number, go ahead and then compensate or borrow from one, and then add or subtract, and you can end up with a whole number, but sometimes, most of the time, it will be a whole number with a decimal. Okay, so now for subtraction, it is a little bit different. You are not going to worry about making whole numbers. So with subtraction, we want to first compensate, so make numbers easier to add, but we also are taking away or adding to make the number easier. So it's just, I will show you this example. So make sure you follow along with me in your spiral. So if you think about this like money, this is 875 minus 226. Well, the 26 is kind of hard to think about mentally. So wouldn't it be easier if this was a 25? So think about quarters. So if I want to make that a 225, I will subtract a 0.01, right? And I want to keep this the exact same. So 8 minus 2 is 6, and then 75 minus, and then the 0.75 minus the 0.25, well, that would be taking 3/4 minus 1/4, and we would end up with 50 cents still. But we have to remember this guy over to the side. So we have to add him back because we took him away to make it an easy compatible number. Now we have to add it back. So now we have 6.51. So that one's kind of confusing. If you get stuck on subtraction, we can work on it in class. We can work on any of this in class at any time tomorrow. Okay, so for your quiz questions, I would like you to try 1 and 2. In your spirals, I want you to show your work, because if you get them wrong, I'm going to ask you tomorrow to show me your work, and I'm going to see where you went wrong so I can try to help you a little bit better. So go ahead and answer number 1 and put it in the quiz question, and then go ahead and do that the same with number 2. So for the first one, the answer is 5.3, and to get that, I borrowed from the 0.5 and I added 2 over here to make this a whole number of 4. And so if I took away 0.2 from this, I would have a 1.3, and then 4 plus 1 is 5, and I have that 0.3 on the back. Now this bottom one's pretty easy because I can take the 0.4 and add it over here to make this a whole number of 5. And so I have 3.5 plus 5, which would be 8.5. All right, now I want you to try 2 subtraction problems. The first one I would like you to try for subtraction is 4.7 minus 1.9, and then put your answer in the quiz question. And then on number 4, I would like you to do 99 minus 8.95. So on this first one to solve it, I'll give you the answer first. The answer is 2.8. I'm going to add a 0.1 to I'm going to add a 0.1 to this number to make it a whole number of 2. So now my problem looks like 4.7 minus 2. I have to remember this guy though, because I added it when it doesn't really exist. So 4.7 minus 2. 4 minus 2 is 2. Add the 0.7. And then since... Okay, so I'm sorry, ignore what I just said on that part about explaining. So the answer is still 2.8, but what I'm going to do is I am going to borrow a 10th from this 9, and I'm going to put it towards this 4.7. So I'm going to make this a 4.8 minus 1.8. Okay, so bear with me. I'm having blonde clamors moments during this. So I'm going to go back over it with you. So 4.7 minus 1.9. If I add a 0.1 over here, like I was saying before, I should get a 2. Okay, so 4.7 minus 2. If I subtract the whole numbers, I get a 2, bring down the 0.7. But I need to re-add this back on. So I re-add it back on, and I get the 2.8. Sorry for all that confusion. Okay, now on the second one, in order to make 99 minus 8.95 a little bit easier, I'm going to keep my whole number of 99. I'm going to think of this as a 9.00. 99 minus 9 is 90, and I had to, in order for me to go from 8.95 to a 9, I had to round up by 0.05. So I have got to add that back on at the end. So your answer should be 90.05 or 90 5/100ths. So I'm sorry if I totally confused you on number 3. If you have a question about it, we will talk about it tomorrow. Make sure in your spirals you are writing down questions or can remember them for the next day so you can bring them to school and ask the class. Because if you have a question, probably most of the class will have the exact same question. So don't be afraid to ask, and we will work it out together on the board. Just like you saw, I needed help with this one. So make sure you do that and bring questions to me tomorrow. See you tomorrow. Bye.